Our gospel this morning comes from the gospel according to Matthew, the 5th chapter. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." The gospel of the Lord. All right. Making sure we got everybody where they're going. All right. Well, I love that image of light in the darkness. Last summer, we took a family vacation to New England, and one night while we were there, we were bumping around the town of Chatham, and John and I were telling the kids about the last time the two of us were there, which of course was in the days before children, when we could go out and do things. And so we're telling our kids about this vacation we took years and years ago, and we wanted to watch the sunrise over the Atlantic. That just seemed like a cool thing to do because we were on the East Coast. So we got up when it was still dark, drove to the beach, and watched the sunrise over the ocean, dispelling the darkness. It was so beautiful. Fortunately, our kids are used to us nerding out and telling them stories like this. So when we suggested, hey, let's drive from this shopping area, let's go over to the beach where we watched the sunrise all those years ago before you were born. And they were like, fine, let's go. So we went. They're 13 and 16. That explains a lot, right? So we drove over there. We got out of the car, and it was cloudy. It was getting dark. And lo and behold, there was a lighthouse there that I did not remember. And so we watched the storm clouds roll in as the sun went down, and we watched the light from the lighthouse pierce the darkness every time it passed over our heads. And when the rain started, we made a break for it. But we know when it comes to darkness, light is incredibly powerful. You know, when you get up in the middle of the night, you turn on the light, and the darkness disappears. Wouldn't it be nice if it were that easy to make the darkness of our world disappear? Boy, that would be nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's lots of good stuff in the world, but when it comes to things that are terrible and painful and horrible, it'd be nice if there were an easy solution. Unfortunately, throughout all of history, there has been war and hatred and injustice, and there probably always will be. You know, the world is a broken place filled with imperfect people like us. And in the midst of this broken world, we are called to be light. Jesus says, "You are the light of the world." And I know there are days when we might say, "Me? No, I don't think so." Because we know that Jesus is the light of the world, right? I mean, isn't it his job to do all of the shining? Isn't it Jesus' job to make the darkness of the world disappear? Yes. And he says, "You are the light of the world." That's how Jesus does it. Through us. Apparently, we have light to shine, and it's our job to shine. I mean, Jesus is really clear that hiding our light under a bushel basket is not part of the plan. Okay? We're supposed to shine light into the dark corners of the world by doing good and being just. In the verses just after Jesus says, "You're the light of the world," he goes on to say that his teachings are connected to the prophets of the Hebrew Bible, our Old Testament. So being a light in the world is not something new. Okay? Throughout the Old Testament, the people of Israel are told that they are to be a light to the nations, a witness to other people of God's loving kindness. So it makes sense that the scholars who put together the lectionary, which is this 3-year cycle of Bible readings we use in worship, it makes sense that they would pair a passage from the Old Testament prophet, Isaiah, with Jesus' charge to shine our light in the world. And I'm so glad they did, because if we want to know what it looks like to shine our light in the world, Isaiah 58 gives us a really good description. So let's talk about Isaiah. It's so good. All right. So this is the scripture that Becky read for us today, and it starts out with what not to do. The people of Israel are going to temple, they're fasting, and they're going through the motions of penance, but the whole time they're doing that, God says, they're oppressing their workers, they're fighting, they're striking with an evil fist. They're not living as a light to the nations. They're not living as examples of God's loving kindness. Have you ever gone to worship with someone, and you both hear the same sermon, and you both sing the same songs about living lives of kindness and love, and then after church you stop at the grocery store on the way home, and something rings up wrong on the cash register, and the person who just sat with you and sang all of these things with you in worship yells at the cashier and just rips him a new one? Or am I the only person this has ever happened to? Okay, this is a story from the pages of my life. Anyway, so this has happened, but I don't understand it. It's like, were you not just weren't we talking about how we treat people? Why not just call it to the cashier's attention? They're not the one who programmed all the prices into the computer. It's not their fault. Just let them know, they'll fix it. Everybody goes on their merry way, right? No need to go ballistic. I think that's a little bit of what Isaiah is getting at when he says that people were going to temple, acting as though they wanted to be good people, but then they'd walk out of the temple and be horrible to the people around them, like they weren't even trying. Because we all make mistakes sometimes. We're not perfect, but it was like they weren't even trying. Okay? They were not shining a light in the darkness. So, then God tells them the way they're supposed to live, how they can shine their light. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Share your food with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. I know, that one cracks me up too. What is going on? Who's hiding from their relatives? I have no idea what that's about, but I think it's a hoot. Doesn't that paint a picture? Hiding. Oh no, here they come. I don't know. They need a cup of sugar. Hide. The other one that stands out to me is to bring the homeless poor into your house. Okay? Now, I don't know what that looked like in Isaiah's time. Were the homeless poor people whose families had turned their backs on them? Were they orphans and widows with nowhere to go? I don't know. And what did it mean to bring these people into your house? It might have meant bringing them into your larger household, where there may have been separate quarters for them, or maybe not. But when I think about doing that today, bringing them into your home, it feels like a challenge. Because the first place my brain goes is the safety of my family. A few years ago, we were in Seattle, and it was very clear that the homeless we encountered in Seattle some of them had severe mental illness that was untreated, unfortunately, or they were under the influence of drugs because they were struggling with addiction. Okay? In those situations, there's a real safety issue. Okay? And it's possible that sometimes we might assume that, all homeless people are like that, even though we know that's not actually the case, so that we can tell ourselves that God isn't really asking us to bring the homeless into our house where they might endanger our children, because I don't believe God would want to endanger our children. But here's the thing. It's not true that that's the situation for every homeless person, but even for those that is their situation, that's not a reason to ignore the charge. It's not a reason to leave people in darkness, because people with untreated mental illness and those who are struggling with addiction are in darkness. Okay? All it means is that if homelessness looks different now than it did in Isaiah's time, we still need to find ways to address it and provide food and shelter for the homeless poor. It is still up to us to shine light into their darkness, to show them God's loving kindness. Okay. So back to the big picture for a minute. All those things God told the people of Israel to do are pretty straightforward. They're about being just, dismantling oppressive systems, and caring for people in need, including your own relatives. Okay? When the people of Israel do that, God says, their light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around them will be as bright as noon. In other words, this is how they let their light shine. Remove oppression, stop pointing fingers at people, stop speaking evil, give food to the hungry, and take care of the afflicted. That's how we let our light shine in the darkness. It makes the world a better place, and it makes the space around you as bright as noon. It pushes darkness away, so you're standing in the sun. So how do we do this? I mean, what we're supposed to do is clear from Isaiah, but where do we get the energy to do it? You know? How do we get out of bed every day ready to shine our light in the world? Well, Jesus thought the image of a burning flame of a lamp would be helpful, so let's talk about fire. When you build a fire in the fireplace or outside in a fire ring, eventually the fire will burn out when it runs out of fuel, right? There's only so much wood, and when the wood is consumed, the fire goes out and there's no more light. That's what happens if we think that the light we're supposed to shine comes from us, if we think it originates with us. Because the reality is that Jesus is the light of the world, and he lives in us. So it's the light of Christ that shines through us. We are not the source. Jesus is. And because he conquered death, that light never goes out. Remember the Christmas verse from John's Gospel? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. In Jesus, there is light. There is hope and love and goodness and mercy, and that lives in us. And we shine all of that into the world when we live in ways that share hope and love and goodness and mercy. And that light never goes out. Jesus rose from the dead. His Spirit gives light to people all over the world now and forever. That's the light that lives in you. That's the light you have to share with the world, starting with the people you run into every day. You can be just. You can be kind and helpful. You can work to free those wrongly imprisoned. You can work to reform systems that are unjust and oppressive. You can care for the hungry, the homeless, those who need clothes. And while you're at it, you can extend kindness to the cashier at the grocery store. You can show love to your family, your neighbors, the people you work with. Let your light shine before others. The darkness around you will be bright as noon. The people around you will experience the warmth of that light and give thanks to God. You can do this because you are the light of the world. Amen.